She told our 8-year-old son she never wanted him, said it out loud in our hallway while he stood there in tears pulling at her sleeve, asking for help with a science project. I had a recorder running in my shirt pocket, had been carrying it for weeks, and every single word went onto that tape. Tracy grabbed her purse and walked out the door to go spend the evening with her $12 million boyfriend, and I stood in that hallway holding my son while he cried, knowing that the woman I had given 18 years of my life to had just handed me everything I needed to take those years back. What she didn't know, what she wouldn't find out for another 10 months, was that the recorder was only the beginning. The GPS tracker under her car, the hotel photographs, the employment records proving 2 months of fabricated shifts, the intercepted text from her lover, the background check on Reginald Hope, and the DNA results that revealed a betrayal going back 9 years before she ever heard his name. She came home to an empty house the very next Tuesday. She called 17 times that night. I let every call go to voicemail and sat in the dark thinking about my kids, my business, and the life I was going to build without her. Sometimes the most powerful thing a man can do is go completely quiet.
My name is Dwayne Collins, and if you had asked me 10 years ago whether I was a happy man, I would have told you yes, without a moment's hesitation. I own a commercial cleaning company in Nebraska. Built it from nothing 12 years ago with a beat-up van, calloused hands, and a stubbornness that wouldn't quit. Today, I have 8 employees and contracts with half the office buildings in town. It's honest work, the kind that doesn't make headlines but keeps the lights on and puts food on the table. And for the longest time, I believed that honest work was enough. That if you showed up every day and gave everything you had to your family, the universe would return the favor. I was wrong. My wife Tracy and I have 3 children. Liam, who's 16 and sharp as a tack. Ava, 12 and full of the kind of questions that make you realize how little adults actually know. And Lucas, our 8-year-old, who still believes with his whole heart that his dad can fix anything. Tracy is 38, a nurse at the county hospital, and by every surface measurement, we were the picture of a working-class American family doing just fine. But pictures lie. The cracks in our marriage didn't appear overnight. They were there from the beginning, hidden beneath date nights and holiday traditions and the ordinary business of raising children. The truth is, Tracy never wanted a big family. After Liam was born, she made it clear, 1 child was enough. She had career goals, she said. Kids were expensive. But I grew up as an only child, and I knew what that loneliness felt like in your bones. The quiet house with no siblings, no chaos, no one to pass the time with. Maybe I was selfish. When the condoms failed a couple of times, I told myself it was fate. Tracy told herself it was betrayal. She never said that to the children's faces, but late at night I would hear her on the phone with her mother, Doreen, talking about how trapped she felt. I told myself she'd come around. That's the thing about love. It makes you optimistic when you should be paying attention. Instead of coming around, Tracy pulled away. She started picking up extra shifts at the hospital, or so she said. She came home exhausted and distant. The children noticed before I did. Liam stopped asking her to his basketball games because she kept saying no. Ava stopped showing her school projects because the interest just wasn't there anymore. And Lucas, sweet, trusting Lucas, slowly began drifting toward me for everything, even the small things that used to belong to his mother. There is a particular kind of loneliness in watching your family slowly fracture and not yet knowing why. You make excuses. You fill in the silences with reasonable explanations. You tell yourself that marriages go through seasons, that tired people grow distant, that tomorrow will be different. I told myself all of it. I believed most of it. But the morning everything changed started like any other Tuesday, with Tracy walking into the kitchen in scrubs that looked newer than usual, her hair done up nice, wearing more makeup than she ever bothered with for work. I told her she looked good, and she barely glanced at me. That small, cold moment was the beginning of the end of the life I thought I had. It started with a phone call I almost didn't answer.
I was supervising a cleaning job at one of our downtown contracts when my old Army buddy Rick Patterson's name lit up my screen, and something in my gut told me to step outside before I picked up. Rick was never a man who called just to chat. We kept in touch the way soldiers do. Christmas texts and the occasional birthday message. Nothing more. So when he said he'd seen Tracy the day before at Murphy's Steakhouse, my hand tightened around the phone before he even finished the sentence. Tracy hated Murphy's. She'd called it overpriced and pretentious the one time I'd suggested it for our anniversary. She wouldn't set foot in the place voluntarily, and yet there she was, according to Rick, sitting across from a man in an expensive suit, older, silver-haired, wearing the kind of watch that costs more than most people's cars. Rick said they looked comfortable together, not like colleagues at a work lunch, comfortable the way people are when they've spent real time with each other, when the performance of formality has already dropped away. I thanked him, told him it was probably nothing, and stood in the parking lot for 3 full minutes staring at the pavement before I went back inside. That night, Tracy came home just after midnight, slipping into bed with the careful quietness of someone who didn't want to wake a sleeping husband. But I wasn't sleeping. I was lying on my side of the mattress with my eyes closed and my chest tight, and when she settled in beside me, I caught it immediately. Cologne. Something expensive and unmistakably male, clinging to her clothes like a secret she hadn't bothered to wash off. I didn't move. I didn't say a word. I just lay there in the dark, breathing steadily, while something cold and certain settled into the space behind my ribs. The next few days, I started paying attention in a way I hadn't allowed myself to before. Tracy's phone, which used to sit face up on the kitchen counter, was now always flipped face down. She started taking a shower the moment she walked through the door, when she used to collapse on the couch first and unwind for an hour. She bought new underwear, lacy, delicate things I never once saw her wear in our bedroom. Small things, individually explainable. Together, they told a story I didn't want to read. What made it worse was watching the kids absorb her absence without being able to name it. Liam had the kind of teenage radar that picks up on emotional temperature before anyone says a word, and he'd gone quiet around her in a way that broke my heart. Ava kept trying, bringing home test papers, showing Tracy drawings, and getting distracted half-responses in return. Lucas still ran to the door when he heard her car pull up, still wanted his mother, still hadn't learned yet that wanting someone doesn't mean they'll show up for you. I watched all of it and said nothing, because I wasn't ready to blow up our lives on a feeling. But the feeling was getting louder every single day, and I knew it was only a matter of time before I had to stop ignoring what my gut had already decided was true. Thursday morning, I made a decision that felt like stepping off a ledge I couldn't step back onto. After Tracy left for her so-called shift and the kids caught their buses, I drove to the county hospital with sweating hands and a rehearsed story about bringing my wife coffee. I walked into the emergency department like I belonged there, nodded at the security guard, and found Janet Mills at the nurses' station, a woman I'd met at hospital charity events over the years, friendly enough to chat, trusting enough not to question a concerned husband. When I told her Tracy had been working so many extra shifts lately and I wanted to surprise her, Janet's face scrunched with genuine confusion. She told me Tracy hadn't worked a single overtime shift in 2 months. Barely picking up her regular hours, Janet said. Dr. Richardson had been frustrated about it. I laughed weakly, said I must have mixed up the dates, and walked out of that hospital on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. 2 months. Tracy had been lying to my face for 2 solid months, coming home smelling like another man, claiming exhaustion from back-to-back surgeries, and I had believed her, because that is what you do when you love someone. You extend grace long past the point where grace is warranted. That afternoon, I called Mike Torres, an old Army buddy who ran a private investigation business out of his garage. Mike was the kind of man who could find out anything about anyone and never once felt the need to brag about it. I told him what I needed, and he went quiet for a long moment before asking if I was sure. I told him I was already down the road, I just needed to know how far it went. We met at a diner on the outskirts of town that evening, and he slid a GPS tracker across the table. No bigger than a matchbox, magnetic, battery life of 3 weeks. He'd monitor it remotely, follow her when she went somewhere worth following, and send me everything. Standard rate was $200 a day.
I handed him $400 in cash and drove home feeling like a man I didn't fully recognize. That night, after Tracy claimed exhaustion and went to bed, I slipped out to the garage and attached the tracker to the underside of her rear bumper. It clicked into place with a soft magnetic thud that sounded enormous in the quiet night air. Walking back into the house, I passed through the kitchen where Lucas had left his sneakers by the back door and Ava's homework was still spread across the table, and I felt the full weight of what I was doing. Not the surveillance, not the suspicion, but the fact that my family had arrived at a place where this was necessary. The man who kissed Tracy goodnight 20 minutes ago wouldn't have done this. But that man had also trusted completely, and trust, I was learning, is only as good as the person holding it. Some people treat your trust like a gift, others treat it like a weakness. I was beginning to understand which kind of woman I had married, and the understanding was the loneliest feeling of my entire life. Mike's first message came Saturday evening while I was helping Lucas with a worksheet at the kitchen table. My son's small hand wrapped around a pencil, his tongue poking out slightly with concentration the way it always did, and my phone buzzed in my pocket with 3 words that changed everything. Got something. Check email. I excused myself to the garage, opened my laptop with hands that weren't quite steady, and the photos loaded one by one like a slow-motion demolition of everything I'd spent 18 years building. Tracy's car in the Marriott parking lot. Tracy walking through the hotel lobby beside a man who matched Rick's description so precisely it was almost cinematic. Silver hair, tailored suit, the unhurried stride of someone who had never once worried about money. The timestamp read 2:47 in the afternoon, the exact hour she was supposed to be starting her shift at the hospital. The next photo showed them at the hotel bar, sitting close enough that there was no professional interpretation available, his hand resting on her knee with the ease of long familiarity. And Tracy was laughing, head thrown back, completely open, in a way I hadn't seen in years. She looked genuinely happy, the kind of happy that doesn't perform for anyone, the kind that just exists because the person you're with makes it impossible not to be. I sat with that image for a long time. The final photo was the one that removed any remaining doubt. Tracy and this man walking into an elevator together, her hand in his, both of them looking at each other with an expression I recognized from the early years of our own relationship, before children and resentment and all the slow erosions of a marriage that only one person was fully committed to. Mike texted shortly after. They stayed 2 hours, he had the license plate, he was running it now. By Sunday morning, the name came back. Reginald Hope, 48 years old, CEO of Hope Development Corporation, married to Patricia Hope for 22 years, 3 children, net worth estimated at $12 million. Everything clicked into place with a coldness that was almost mechanical. Tracy wasn't simply having an affair. She was auditing her options. She had looked at our life, the honest work, the 3 kids, the modest house, and decided she deserved an upgrade, and she had found one. Reginald Hope was the life she wanted when she looked at ours and felt trapped. That Sunday she came home glowing, told me the hospital had been quiet, and Dr. Richardson had personally thanked her for coming in on short notice. How thoughtful of him, I said, watching her face. She smiled and headed upstairs for the shower, humming a tune I'd been hearing all week. I looked it up after she went to bed. The Way You Look Tonight. It had been playing in the background of the hotel bar photo that Mike sent. She was humming the song from her afternoon with another man in my house, in front of my children, without a single flicker of guilt crossing her face. That was the moment I stopped grieving and started planning. A man can absorb a great deal of pain. What he cannot absorb, what he should never absorb, is being made a fool of in his own home. Monday morning, I called Robert Fleming and made an appointment I never imagined I'd need. Fleming ran a small law practice above a hardware store on Main Street. Nothing fancy, nothing intimidating, just a thin man in his 50s with tired eyes that had witnessed too many marriages collapse under the weight of secrets. Mike had recommended him, and Mike's recommendations had never steered me wrong. I laid out everything on Fleming's desk: the lies about work, the GPS data, the hotel photos, the background check on Reginald Hope, and Fleming listened without interruption, taking careful notes in a small leather notebook. When I finished, he looked up and told me I needed to document everything. Every lie, every missed school event, every night she came home late wearing someone else's cologne. He told me Nebraska was not a no-fault state when it came to adultery and property division, and that her affair was going to cost her significantly if we went to court. I left his office feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks. Not hope exactly, but direction, which is sometimes more useful. That afternoon, I bought a small journal and started filling it methodically. Dates, times, specifics. Every evening she claimed a double shift when the hospital had no record of her being there. Every basketball game Liam played without his mother in the stands. Every time Lucas asked for her and got a distracted, impatient response instead of a parent. I wrote it all down because I understood now that feelings don't win in courtrooms. Evidence does. I also bought a small digital recorder and started keeping it in my shirt pocket during conversations with Tracy. Nebraska is a one-party consent state, meaning I could legally record any exchange I participated in. And something told me Tracy would eventually say something that needed to be preserved. The breakthrough I hadn't anticipated came on a Wednesday evening. Tracy had gone upstairs to shower after another fabricated shift, and I was at the kitchen table helping Ava with math homework when Tracy's phone buzzed on the counter. She'd forgotten it, something that essentially never happened anymore, because that phone had become an extension of her secret life. I looked at the screen before I could stop myself. The message was from a contact saved as Dr. Richardson. Can't wait to see you tomorrow, same place, same time, you're incredible. I took a screenshot, deleted the notification, and was back at the table with Ava before Tracy came downstairs looking for her phone. She checked her messages, found nothing unusual, and went about her evening while I sat across from my daughter and felt the full shape of my wife's betrayal settle into something I could actually use. That night, I transferred the screenshot to a password-protected folder on my laptop and called Mike to arrange another day of surveillance. I had GPS records, photographs, employment documentation proving months of lies, a recorded message from her lover, and a lawyer who knew exactly how to arrange it all into something a judge couldn't ignore. The trap wasn't set out of revenge. It was set out of necessity. I had 3 children in this house, and whatever happened next, I was not going to let them end up unprotected on the wrong side of a custody battle with a woman who had been lying to all of us for longer than any of us yet knew.
Everything I had been carefully, quietly building came to a head on a Friday evening that I will never forget as long as I live. Tracy was upstairs getting ready for another fake shift. I could hear the familiar sounds of her routine, the hairdryer, the dresser drawer, the particular rhythm of someone preparing to walk out of their family's life for a few hours, when Lucas came thundering down the stairs with tears already streaming down his face. He was 8 years old, and he had a science project due Monday, and he needed his mother, which is the most natural, uncomplicated thing a child can need. He found Tracy in the hallway and grabbed the hem of her scrub top the way small children do, with absolute physical trust, the kind that hasn't yet learned it can be rejected. She pulled away from him like the contact was an inconvenience she didn't have time for. She told him she didn't have time, told him she was trying to get ready, and when he reminded her through his tears that she had promised to help, she looked at her 8-year-old son and told him she had never promised anything. "Ask your father," she said. "He's good at cleaning up messes." I had the recorder running in my shirt pocket. I had been carrying it for weeks, and it had captured arguments and cold silences and small cruelties, but nothing like what came next. I told her calmly that Lucas was 8 years old and asking for help with his homework. She turned on me then with everything she had been storing up, and the words that came out of her mouth were not the words of a woman having a bad evening. They were the words of a woman who had decided she was done pretending. She said she was tired of these kids always needing something, tired of a life she never chose, tired of 3 children she never wanted. She said I had forced this on her and she was finished pretending to be happy about it. And then Ava's voice came from the staircase. Our 12-year-old daughter was standing there in her pajamas, having heard every word. Tracy looked at her with an expression I will spend the rest of my life trying to forget. Not guilt, not remorse, not the instinct to repair what she had just shattered, but pure, naked resentment toward her own child. Ava asked why her mother didn't love them anymore. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I have ever heard. Tracy didn't answer.
She grabbed her purse and walked out the door, announcing she had important things to do, and the sound of her car pulling out of the driveway was the sound of a woman choosing herself over everything she was supposed to protect. I held both kids while they cried. Liam came downstairs a few minutes later, looked at the scene quietly, and told me in a voice older than 16 years had any right to sound that he had known for a couple of weeks she wasn't going to work. He'd seen her at the mall with Reginald holding hands while she was supposedly saving lives at the hospital. That night, after I got the younger ones to bed, I called Mike and told him I needed everything. Fast. The recordings, the photos, all of it. Because whatever damage Tracy was going to do, I was not going to let her do any more of it to my children.
The end came on a Tuesday morning in October, and I had been preparing for it with the same quiet, methodical focus I bring to everything that matters. For 3 weeks, I had been moving pieces of my life out of that house, one careful trip at a time. Legal documents, family photos, the kids' birth certificates, my business records, everything that couldn't be replaced. I rented a storage unit across town and filled it slowly, never taking enough at once to raise suspicion because Tracy was still living in the comfortable illusion that I didn't know, and I needed that illusion intact until the moment I was ready. I talked to my children gently and honestly, in the way you talk to people you respect, even when they are young. Liam understood completely. The younger two were confused, but they trusted me, which is the greatest gift a parent can ever be given, and the heaviest responsibility I have ever carried. Tracy left that morning the same way she had left 1,000 mornings before. Kissed me goodbye at the kitchen door, scrubs pressed, phone already in her hand, completely unaware that 18 years of marriage were ending behind her eyes. After the kids caught their buses, I loaded the last of my things into the truck. The dogs came with me. Tracy had never liked them anyway. I left 2 things on the kitchen table, where she would see them the moment she walked back through the door. My wedding ring, placed in the center of the table like a full stop at the end of a very long sentence, and a single piece of paper with 4 words written in my handwriting. I know about Reginald. I drove away from that house without looking in the rearview mirror. The kids were safely at school, their bags packed the night before with enough for a few days at my brother Jim's place. I had already arranged everything. I had already thought of everything, because that is what fathers do. They think of everything, quietly, without applause, because the people depending on them need the ground to be solid even when everything above it is shaking. Tracy came home to an empty house that afternoon. She would spend the next 10 months trying to understand why, but the answer had been sitting on her kitchen table waiting for her since morning. My phone started ringing at 6 o'clock. Tracy calling from an unknown number. She must have realized I'd blocked her primary line. I didn't answer. She called 17 times before midnight. I let every single call go to voicemail and sat in my brother's spare room listening to the messages progress through their predictable stages. First, denial, calm and almost convincing. Then anger, sharp and accusatory, claiming I had stolen her children like a coward. Then bargaining, voice cracking, saying it was a mistake, that we could fix it, that she chose us. But she hadn't chosen us. She had chosen Reginald and hotel rooms and a life without the weight of children who needed things from her. She had made that choice dozens of times over months and months, and every single time she came home and kissed me goodnight, she had made it again. There was nothing left to fix because she had spent a very long time making sure of that. The woman who had managed a double life for the better part of a year came apart in public, and our small Nebraska town watched every second of it. According to my brother Jim, Tracy showed up at his house 3 separate times in the first week demanding to see the children. Each time Jim met her at the door with the same calm answer, "They don't want to see you right now." And each time she left a little more unraveled than the last. She tried my mother next, driving out to her house and standing on the porch with red-rimmed eyes, asking Mom to tell her where I was, saying we could fix everything if I would just talk to her. My mother is 5 feet 2 inches of pure Nebraska backbone. She looked Tracy up and down with the quiet disappointment of a woman who had watched her son give everything to a marriage that was being quietly dismantled from the inside. And she told Tracy exactly what she thought.
that she had told her grandchildren she never wanted them, that she had broken her son's heart for a rich man's attention, and that there was nothing left to fix. Then she closed the door. Tracy's most desperate move came through Lucas's elementary school. She showed up claiming he had a doctor's appointment and needed to be released early, but the school secretary called me immediately, and when Tracy realized the school wasn't going to hand my son over, she stood in the parking lot and screamed that I had kidnapped her children, loud enough for half the neighborhood to hear. By evening, the story had made its rounds through town. She even hired her own private investigator to find me, a man so obvious that he might as well have been wearing a sign, sitting outside my storage unit and trailing me to the grocery store. I called Fleming, who told me to document the harassment because it would work in our favor. 3 weeks after I left, Mike called with the update I had quietly been anticipating. Reginald Hope had ended things. Mike had followed Tracy to the Hope development offices and watched her go in and come out 20 minutes later, in tears, sitting in her car for a full hour before she could bring herself to drive away. She had gambled her family against the promise of something grander, and lost both at the same time. The man she had sacrificed 18 years of marriage for had looked at the chaos her choices created: a furious husband with evidence, a pending divorce, a soon-to-be public scandal, and decided she was no longer worth the complications. The divorce papers were served on a cold December morning at the county hospital, delivered by Fleming deliberately to her workplace so that her colleagues would be present when she received them. According to Janet Mills, Tracy broke down completely at the nurse's station, crying and saying it was all a mistake, until Dr. Richardson had to send her home. The papers laid out everything in precise, documented language: adultery, abandonment of parental duties, emotional abuse of minors, financial deception, every lie time-stamped and evidenced, every absence accounted for, every cruel word I had quietly recorded now transformed into legal ammunition. Tracy hired Carol Stern, an expensive and aggressive attorney, with a $15,000 retainer that could only have come from one source. Reginald Hope was funding the legal battle even after ending the affair, which told me everything I needed to know about the kind of man he was and the kind of game Tracy thought she was still playing.
Carol Stern's opening strategy was exactly what Fleming had predicted: file aggressively, flip the narrative, make Tracy the victim. The motion claimed I had been psychologically abusive throughout our marriage, that I had forced Tracy into pregnancy she didn't want through reproductive coercion, and that my departure with the children constituted kidnapping driven by jealous rage. Fleming read it over the phone with a dry calm that told me he had seen this exact play before. He called it a Hail Mary. We had GPS records, hotel photographs, employment documentation, intercepted messages, and most devastatingly, the audio recording of Tracy telling our children she had never wanted them. Words delivered to a tearful 8-year-old that no courtroom reframing was going to soften. The temporary hearing was held on January 15th, and it was a masterclass in methodical legal destruction. Fleming presented the evidence in sequence, quietly and without theater, letting each piece do its own work. When the recording played in that courtroom, Tracy's voice, unmistakably hers, telling Lucas that she was tired of kids always needing things, I watched several people visibly recoil. Judge Morrison's expression moved through a series of stages that ended somewhere around cold resolve. When Stern stood to argue that Tracy deserved a second chance and had shown genuine remorse, Judge Morrison cut her off mid-sentence. The ruling was immediate. I received temporary full custody of all 3 children: the house, the business assets, and the retirement accounts. Tracy received her car, her personal belongings, and nothing else. As we left the courthouse and Tracy made her final plea, "They're my children too," I stopped and looked at her for the last time as my wife. I told her that DNA test or no DNA test, these children were mine, and I was never letting anyone hurt them again. 3 months later, Fleming called with news that rearranged everything I thought I understood about the past 9 years of my life. The court-ordered psychological evaluation had included, as standard procedure in contested custody cases, DNA testing for all 3 children. Fleming said my name carefully before he said anything else, the way people do when they know the next sentence is going to land hard. Lucas was not biologically mine. I sat in my truck outside the school and stared at the windshield for a long time. Lucas, the boy who still crawled into my lap for bedtime stories, who called me dad with the uncomplicated certainty of a child who has never had reason to doubt it, shared no genetic markers with me. Tracy's betrayal hadn't started with Reginald Hope. It had started at least 9 years earlier, and I had raised another man's son every single day since then without ever knowing. When Lucas ran out of school that afternoon, backpack bouncing, excited about a substitute teacher who would let them watch a documentary about volcanoes, I felt the same love I had always felt, unchanged, unqualified, not reducible to biology. The final divorce hearing in March was brief. Tracy arrived looking hollowed out, weight gone, hair unwashed, Reginald having cut all ties after his own wife filed for divorce, Stern clearly running out of arguments and money. Judge Morrison awarded me full custody of all 3 children, the house, the business assets, and the retirement accounts. Tracy received her car, her personal belongings, and nothing else. As we left the courthouse and Tracy made her final plea, "They're my children too," I stopped and looked at her for the last time as my wife. I told her that DNA test or no DNA test, these children were mine, and I was never letting anyone hurt them again. 5 years have a way of quietly rebuilding what betrayal tried to destroy. And I want you to understand what 5 years of choosing your children every single day actually looks like. Because it doesn't look like a dramatic victory. It looks like Tuesday morning pancakes and an argument about which movie to watch tonight, and a 13-year-old who made the starting lineup on his basketball team and wants you in the bleachers for every single game. Lucas is 13 now, tall and loud and relentlessly optimistic in the way that makes you believe the world might actually be okay. He doesn't know about the DNA test, and I have decided he never needs to. The man who taught him to ride a bike, who sat with him through every nightmare, who helped him with that science project on the Friday his mother walked out, that man is his father. Biology is the smallest part of what makes a parent. Ava is 17 and heading to college on a partial academic scholarship that she earned entirely on her own while I watched from the kitchen table, where she spent 3 years doing homework and growing into someone I am extraordinarily proud of. She is confident in a way that Tracy's absence created rather than diminished, as though being released from that particular coldness gave her room to become fully herself. When she started dating, she told me she wanted someone who treated her the way I had treated her mother before her mother messed it up. That sentence lives in my chest like a small, permanent warmth. Liam graduated valedictorian and is finishing his sophomore year studying engineering at a university 3 states away. He calls every Sunday without fail, and sometimes in those calls he mentions seeing Tracy around town. She works at a discount store now and lives in a small apartment and never remarried. And his voice carries no bitterness when he says it, only a kind of resolved understanding that some people make choices that cost them everything and then have to live inside those consequences. 2 years ago, I met Sarah at one of Lucas's basketball games. She's a teacher and a widow with a 10-year-old daughter named Emma, who has her mother's laugh and her own particular brand of stubbornness that makes me smile every time I see it. Sarah didn't rush anything, neither did I, because I needed to be certain she wanted all of us, the noise, the history, the complicated, beautiful chaos of 3 kids who had already been through something and come out the other side of it intact. When I proposed last Christmas, Lucas was the first one to hug her, before I even got the ring fully out of my pocket. Tracy has requested to see the children 3 times in 5 years. Each time they declined without drama or resentment, simply declined, which told me they had processed what happened in a way that was healthier than I had dared to hope. Judge Morrison terminated her parental rights 2 years ago when she stopped showing up for the supervised visits the court had ordered. Last month, a letter arrived from Tracy. She had heard about my engagement and wanted to clear the air before I remarried. I read the first paragraph and threw it away. This morning, Sarah made pancakes while I packed lunches and Emma and Lucas argued about the movie, and the kitchen was full of exactly the kind of noise that used to feel like everything I was afraid of losing. Tracy came home to an empty house 5 years ago and spent a long time wondering why. The answer was always simple. She chose to destroy something real for something that was never going to last. I chose to build something better. And sometimes, if you're willing to do the work, better turns out to be more than you ever thought to ask for.